This week, we have a very special episode of Paul Security Weekly. We have three interview/technical segments with three very special guests that we're going to skip security news this week. I apologize. We'll be back next week to do security news. This week, though, Richard Moulds from Whitewood Security joins us again. We're going to talk about ducks. So we got the Raka, the crack, and now duck.
Alphabet soup this week.
Alphabet soup this week. And then Tim Medine from the SANS Institute is going to deliver a technical segment on abusing Kerberos tickets in an Active Directory environment. And in the last segment, a pre-recorded interview with Gadi Evron from Symmetria on not so much honeypots, but cyber deception and hacking back in the most legal sense is the best way I can put that. All that and more on this edition of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly.
I'm, of course, your host, Paul Asadorian. Excited to be here, as always, on Paul's Security Weekly.
Hi, and welcome to the show. I totally introduce our host right now, but I've got a totally awkward boner.
What? Where? Oh, hey! I'm in the studio with you guys. That's kind of cool.
Sounds like a plan.
And we'll at least have one person listening.
That's right. Just saying.
Yeah, I know, and I appreciate it, and I'm glad you enjoyed your spooning with Jeff. But
Hey, that's
Actually built a new office.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, third baby on the way, so I needed a new office.
Nice.
I lost my old office. That's now the baby room.
Brought to you by... Has your network been breached? Cybereason can help you answer this question. Cybereason products hunt for threats within your network and eliminate them in real time. To Cybereason, real time means within seconds. Founded by former military hackers who don't play by the rules, they've built this experience into their platform. Harness ingenuity and imagination, not just code, to defeat attackers. Cybereason, disrupt the adversary and let the hunt begin. Make sure your team is prepared to fight off the latest cybersecurity threat. IT Pro TV is the resource to keep you and your IT team skills up to date. You can stream IT Pro TV's courses live and on demand worldwide, so there's no need to send staff to off-site training. Their team solution provides access to a supervisor portal for full control over your team's training schedule and group analytics. Go to itpro.tv/Security Weekly and use the code SW30 to try it free for 7 days and receive 30% off your monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. To learn more about IT Pro TV's team solution, sign up for a free demo of their supervisor portal. Endgame automates the hunt for both known and never-before-seen adversaries in enterprise networks. Built on unique knowledge on the adversary's tools, techniques, and tactics, Endgame's centrally managed agent prevents, detects, and responds to advanced adversaries in the earliest stages of the kill chain without prior knowledge. Endgame, automate the hunt.
Welcome, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly, episode 535 for November 2nd, 2017. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian. And we've got a packed show for you. I'm very excited about today. Here in studio with us is Richard Moulds from Whitewood Security. Richard, welcome to the show.
Hey, Paul. Nice to be back.
Nice to have you in studio. And for the first time, if you cut the Richard shot, we've got the hack naked bat in the back. Eddie the Yeti was there at DerbyCon doing artwork on the bats. And if you bought a bat, your proceeds went to charity. For the Hackers for Charity with Johnny Long. And Eddie did some custom artwork on it. So we purchased one of the bats and proudly displaying it here in studio, which is awesome. And on the lines via Skype, Mr. Jeff Mann is here. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hey, Paul. Good to see you. Sorry we missed you out in the Wild West last weekend.
Yes, I heard it was a good time. Sorry I couldn't make it. You got your white hat on today, which was appropriate for our previous.
I got my Google hat. I'm afraid they're scanning my brain, but whatever. I'm a white hat hacker now.
There you go.
Low-tech Google glasses.
Yes. Mr. Joff Thayer is on the lines via Skype. Joff, welcome to the show.
G'day, Paul. How are you? Look, if you, I know you didn't get to Wild West Hacking Fest last week, but it was absolutely a blast. So you must show up. I don't think we've quite recovered yet. I do have the logo. Where is it? There it is. There's the logo. Yep. Shirt. Yep.
Oh, I like how they give out long sleeve shirts because it was cold there in South Dakota.
It was extremely cold.
The first day, I think it was maybe Thursday. It was cold. It actually snowed on us.
We woke up, it was 5 degrees.
Oh, that's cold.
Yep.
Alrighty. Quick announcement. Make sure you do 2 things for us. Number 1, subscribe to our mailing list at securityweekly.com/insider. We'll give you exclusive updates and invite you to some of our awesome webcasts. One that we did today with Signal Sciences, which I was stating before the show was really exciting. You should definitely check that out. Number 2, go to securityweekly.com/subscribe and subscribe to all of our shows, including Secure Digital Life, Hack Naked News, Startup Security Weekly, and Enterprise Security Weekly. All are available in separate feeds and are published every week to our podcast ecosystem so you can enjoy them. Richard, welcome back to the program. We had some topics that we have been discussing today that we're going to talk about for the show. I really want to know about this new duck attack because we didn't do a show last week because we were working on our sets and the rest of the crew was at Wild West Hacking Fest. And we don't have a security news segment scheduled for this week because we had 3 segments planned. So you're like, Paul, there's a new attack against encryption. I'm like, I totally missed it. Totally missed it. So we'll rely on you. Fortunately, you're an expert in these matters, Richard, to tell us about the new. Is it duck?
Yeah, but it's spelt funny. It's D-U-H-K.
D-U-H-K.
Not D-U-C-K, as you might imagine.
Gotcha.
Everybody's
I can already see where this is going.
Everyone's got to be a little bit funky with how they spell this stuff. And it's weird that every crypto attack somehow needs an acronym. You can't just give it a regular name. It's got to be letters. So, and I think you can feel good about missing it because it was 3, right? There were 3 crypto vulnerabilities in 10 days. So blink and you miss one. Oh shit!
Right.
What's
another
happening?
Crypto bug.
So
there's another one.
That's right. But and they're all, in the sense, they're all different, but they're all the same in the sense they're all focused on keys. They're all trying to break, in one way or another, keys. So we had crack first, then we had rocker, and then we had duck. And I think rocker is probably the most scary of them all.
I agree. We did a segment on that.
Right.
But you definitely got me on the boat of that's the most significant one.
But thing about duck, which stands for don't use hardware or hard-coded keys. I think the lesson here is when NIST deprecates something, pay attention. This is an algorithm that comes from the 90s. It's a random number generator algorithm. So it's what in this case, VPN firewalls we're using to generate keys for encrypting traffic on a link. And
so it's independent of IPsec and all of the...
Yeah.
Thank God we don't have to have that conversation with Ike and ISACAM. Oh, my God.
This is how you go about generating the keys in the first place.
To do all of that encryption with IPsec, and Ike, and ISACAM.
Yep. So there's lots of algorithms. We can get into algorithms for generating random numbers, but this was developed in the 90s, and it's been known to be flawed for a long time, like decades.
So it's not specific to a library or a chip. It's just it's inherent in the way.
It's the actual algorithm, just like
it's the algorithm,
just like data encryption standard DES. We figure out these things can be broken over time. That's the problem with crypto algorithms is. How do you know they're weak? How do you know the only way you know that they're breakable is to break them, and sometimes that takes decades. So this one was identified as being weak decades ago, and the standards bodies said it's weak, don't use it. And by 2016, you better have taken it out of your products because by then it'll be horribly attackable. Turns out, of course, there are plenty of products out there that still use it, plenty of people still using it, and the University of Pennsylvania came out and said, this is a real deal.
And this is the algorithm that has to do with random number generation?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the algorithm is called X931. So it's, like I say, it's been, old. It's an old friend, as it were, in the general suite. This was an approved algorithm. This is not some open source thing. This was an approved part of the FIPS 140 crypto certification suite administered by NIST. And so generating random numbers, we know, we talked about it last time, computers are not good at doing random things. Computers do what they're programmed to do.
Right.
So this is an algorithm. This says this is how you go about making a bunch of random numbers. And you should you should shuffle that process, you should seed that process with random inputs. A few bits of randomness can generate loads of random numbers on the output as long as the bits going in are somewhat random. It's like dealing a deck of cards. You could deal a deck of cards, and really the value of the deal comes from how well you shuffle the deck,
right?
Not how well you deal with it.
Could you refer to them as naughty bits?
Naughty bits.
Thank you.
Oh, my naughty bits.
There you go.
But that's a slightly lurid English tone.
I love it.
Yeah, it's you have to say naughty bits.
Naughty bits.
Yeah. Naughty bits.
Yeah.
So these aren't called naughty bits, these are called seed bits. And so what's bizarre about this algorithm is it actually allows you to use fixed seed bits.
Oh, wait.
All right? Which seems weird.
That does
but in this case, isn't the point that you're seeding it with a random value?
Well, you're supposed to be, yeah.
Each time.
That's right, because otherwise the algorithm generates the same numbers over and over. Right?
So if you seed it with the same thing every time, it doesn't defeat the...
So this particular algorithm, this X931 algorithm, takes 2 inputs to generate that randomness. One can be a fixed number, which you hard code into the software, into the source.
Convenient if you're a software developer.
Jolly convenient.
Yeah.
The other random input is a timestamp, right? Time's not known for its randomness. Time tends to
be pretty
predictable. Right? That's what we like.
Even with leap year, you make a change once every...
That's right.
It also keeps slipping into the future.
Yeah. My time sometimes is a little bit random, but anyway, it tends to be fairly linear. So
put a time down to the second?
Just a timestamp, yeah. Just grabbed off the host.
I got down to the second, right? So
So, but something that's ultimately guessable. You can work your way backwards and forwards.
I gotcha.
So the flaw of this algorithm is that it allowed 2 inputs. One was entirely predictable, and one could be fixed. So when the acronym for this attack is DUHK, don't use hard-coded keys, it doesn't really mean don't use hard-coded keys. What it really means is don't use hard-coded seeds.
Right, or predictable seeds.
Well, in this case,
Richard,
even worse.
Quick question. And I've been on the road. I haven't had a chance to read up on any of this. I assume that the clever name has something to do with one of the pretty common implementations, which is called duckput, derived unique key per transaction.
Sadly, not. No.
Really?
That's quite an interesting connection. Yeah, but no. No.
Oh, okay. Well,
no. Duckput is the mechanism for establishing symmetric keys between point-of-sale terminals and your bank.
Oh, so that would explain why Jeff knows it because he was PCI. Man.
So it's part of PCI. So
I didn't say it first, Paul. You
right. So those things you swipe your cards into. Well, we don't swipe anymore, of course. We plug our cards into the reader, right? Exactly.
Yeah, it's totally different.
So those terminals are all certified, and the keys they use to communicate back to your bank to encrypt your PIN, if you're typing a PIN in, that uses this algorithm called duckput, which has an interesting coincidence in terms of the letters it uses, but that's about it.
I gotcha.
Yeah. So this
we can talk about that later because I've long suspected that it had issues, but you can maybe enlighten me. But another time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just the idea of using unique keys per transaction is pretty innovative.
Well, and not in the case we're talking about with Duck, it's not a unique seed per, because it's not the key, it's the seed, right?
That's right. Yeah. So it's a misnomer to say it's a hard-coded key. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of examples. I mean, you mentioned it earlier, talking about Docker. Plenty of examples where you have hard-coded credentials in those types of environments. In some ways, this is even worse because every instance of that product, and they specifically name Fortinet and some versions of Fortinet products, have the same hard-coded key because it's in the code.
Whoops.
Which means if you can guess the timestamp, which that's not particularly difficult, you can rewind all the keys that these things ever generated.
I have a question that
they should have called it DUFS. DUFS. Don't use a fixed seed.
So we were asking the question, Richard, and you probably have a better analogy for this. What's the difference between a salt and a seed?
They're effectively the same.
Okay.
They're effectively the same. Seeds you tend to use the phrase seeds when you're thinking about random number generation. You think about salts to sort of randomize, initializing protocol handshakes. So one's, in some ways, seeds, I guess, are lower level, more algorithmic, whereas salts are more about trying to make this protocol exchange unique.
Now,
But it's a similar concept.
What's the difference between a nonce and a salt? This is an educational show. I feel like we should educate.
Okay, so again, they're very similar. Nonces are just, they're variables to try and kickstart a protocol exchange. You sort of have to start with something. So I'll send you a random number, and you'll use that as a basis to start a handshake. And in fact, in the case of this duck vulnerability, it's the nonce that actually is the problem. That's what actually opens up this vulnerability, because you're generating these random numbers. You're using some of the random numbers to generate keys, but because the nonce has to be random, you'll use some of the random numbers to be your nonces, right? But your nonces are not encrypted. Your nonces go over the network and are visible.
Yeah, right.
So you're essentially, what you're doing is you're giving the attacker a snapshot of the output of your random number generator in the nonces, right? Which means if you can figure out what the PRNG is doing, the sequence of bits that are coming out, you know what the nonces essentially give you windows into that thing. They give you clues. So if you can guess the timestamp, then you can figure out what the keys would have been, either side of the nonce.
So you can predict what the next nonce is going to be, essentially.
Well, the nonces are not encrypted, so nonces are just going over the network. That's in clear text, so you can just pick those up. So it's literally like I'm giving you clues. It's literally like I'm saying to you, I'm going to use the first byte out of my RNG as a key, and I'm going to send the second byte over the network that you can see. It's almost like a free gift.
Right.
So you can use that to try and work your way back to calculate.
To derive the key.
To derive the key. And therefore you can unlock the VPN and listen to whatever is going down the wire.
Interesting.
And
it's almost like seeing how they're shuffling the cards. If you could somehow get a high-speed camera, right, and see the sequence every time they're shuffling the cards.
If you rather than shuffling the cards randomly, right? If your shuffle was, hey, let's just move every fourth card, 2 stages back, and there was some philosophy to that, then if you showed me a portion of the deal, I could figure out eventually what the entire deal was.
That's a great analogy.
And that's a problem.
That's why we bring you here, is for analogies like that.
Right, and that's
people understand what we're talking about. Yeah, that's great.
So that's scary because it means a VPN connection can be broke, but it's but in some ways it's an old algorithm. It's an algorithm we knew was broken. It's an algorithm most vendors have got rid of a long time ago. We're dealing with the fallout of people just not deprecating stuff in a time frame that they should be deprecating. So it's a vulnerability, but it's not, hey, the sky's falling type vulnerability, which is what Rocker was.
How difficult is it to fix, though? Because you have to then put in a new algorithm, correct?
Yeah, there are replacement random number generator algorithms to replace X931, which, the vendors mentioned have already done. So it's a software patch. It's straightforward.
Oh, so it's probably not that horrible, because you don't have to change the logic of your code.
No.
You change the source of where you're getting your...
Right. This is low level. Yeah, this is low level stuff. This is, like you say, this is not IKE. This is not how you're encrypting data. This is just where you get your numbers from.
I gotcha.
Yeah. And it's been fixed by almost everybody. It's there's laggards. Okay, that's what gets people into systems these days.
But it's good that we're talking about that, and maybe it'll push people forward.
Well, I think it shows...
warn people to pay attention when they deprecate an algorithm to stay ahead of the problem, no?
Well, right. And I think it gets people thinking about, what randomness means and where these keys come from, which is what I think is, and it's sort of interesting to look at these 3 vulnerabilities as a set, because each one of them is sort of a different attack against a key. Yeah. And that's the thing, we talked about last time, that's the thing about crypto. It's, the key represents a single point of risk. If that key gets compromised in any way, the whole house of cards just goes.
Right.
There's
Back to the card analogy.
Right. It's not like
don't bring up house of cards this week. Keep going.
Why?
Because it was canceled.
Oh, it's a TV show. That's right.
It's a TV show.
Kevin Spacey.
Hey,
Sorry.
I have a question.
Oh, that house of cards.
We don't want to go that way.
That's a whole different house of cards.
It's interesting that you started this by saying, when the governing agencies say, like NIST, say deprecate something to pay attention. I had a running argument with a certain somebody at a former employer about a certain vulnerability scan engine when the whole issue came up with deprecating SSL for for devices, and what was loosely based on things like Heartbleed and a few other things. But the mandate came out, and it's a PCI thing. The mandate came out that NIST had deprecated the use of SSL, and you're supposed to be on TLS. I think they allowed in certain circumstances 1.1, but they really wanted everybody on 1.2, and that was all supposed to take place like 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And then they realized that everybody was hard coding all of this open SSL, and it was not a small task to update all the point of sale systems that were out there. Sure. And so they pushed the date for adoption. I want to say it's coming up either the end of this year or the beginning of next year. I forget what the date is. But the argument that I had was, if, like you said, if NIST deprecates something, don't we as a scan vendor have sort of an obligation to flag the use of that particular version of whatever cryptographic algorithm it is, and point it out to our customers? And the argument back was, well, it's mostly a math problem. It's kind of theoretical. There are no known attacks in the wild yet. And of course, somebody else, it's their baby, so they won the argument. But I'm interested on your thoughts, just from the perspective of sort of full disclosure and making sure that people are aware of what the issues are. This particular one, there's a paper written. There's they've kind of proven the attack, so maybe that's proving the other person's point. I don't know, but what are your thoughts on sort of responsible disclosure?
Well, I mean, I think you pay attention when this say something's broken, you believe it. I mean, these people have some of the best cryptographers there is around. And there's a lot of industry contribution to some of these decisions as well. So
you're saying NIST does?
NIST, yeah. Absolutely. So I mean, it's. But
NIST is the body that's really saying is the authority on which algorithms are, and when they say something's deprecated, that's a security vulnerability potentially, but with much authority behind that.
That's right. They were essentially announcing a vulnerability.
Yeah. Richard, you needed to be in Jeff's corner when he was making the argument at that company that he worked for.
I mean, they publish periodically a recommendation for how long all of our existing algorithms. It's not that they're announcing the moment at which they go bad. They say 256-bit AES is good until 2037.
But
so they make those predictions.
That's not like a security. That's not like anyone, not just a security company, but really anyone like making a blog post going, I predicted this algorithm is going to be good till 2036. Mm-hmm. What you're saying is that, and I didn't realize NIST to the extent NIST has teams of people that are using math to calculate that that's when that's going to happen, right?
I mean, you have to work on the assumption, as Jeff said, there's no known attacks. Okay, that's great. Just because I don't know about it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Exactly.
One works on the assumption that NIST probably know more about what's a known attack than what's not a known attack than anybody else. Mm-hmm. So I tend to believe.
Yeah, that's an interesting aspect of the argument, Jeff. To your side was just what Richard said. Just because there's no known attack doesn't mean there won't be one in some foreseeable point in the future.
Or that there isn't one already and we just don't know about it.
Or there isn't one already and we don't know about it, right? And NIST goes so far as to give you a forward prediction on when they think it'll be broken, which is, I mean, that's great information. So use it.
But that's it. I find it interesting that with a lot of vulnerabilities, I've never put much stake into saying, well, we should only take an action if we know that for sure something bad is going to happen. Like, we should only take an action if we know someone can actively break something or write an exploit or there is an exploit. Right. If we know there's a problem or potentially a problem, let's fix that because it's a problem. Let's not wait until there's evidence of a bad thing that's going to happen in the future. Let's just fix that problem.
Right. So there's implementation vulnerabilities, which is what the Rocker thing was all about. Okay, that was somebody building a chip and taking a shortcut, which meant that a perfectly good standard didn't operate as securely as we expected. So that's not something you'd expect.
So the shortcut was in their library. So their developers took a shortcut when they wrote the library in the Rocker attack.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And which is why it's specific to Infineon, right?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to say that's a one-off though. That's not a common practice by any development team.
Not intentionally.
What, poor implementations? Yeah, I'm sure that never happens. Yeah.
Developers never take shortcuts, Jeff.
No.
I mean, you've never developed code personally and taken a shortcut, right?
There's what's the estimate about how much code that's out there being used today that is not original? It's like 70% or 80% or something like that.
Well, there was actually a study done on Stack Overflow. They analyzed the post related to multiple language. I think Java was their focus, and they said, I don't know, I think your statistic is accurate, Jeff. Like 60% of the recommendations on Stack Overflow for Java code were vulnerable to some kind of attack.
That's crazy.
Something like that. I don't remember the exact story, but basically, if you went to Stack Overflow to figure out how to do something, you likely are getting a recommendation that could potentially lead to a security vulnerability.
So I think with crypto is a little bit different because there's implementation errors get made, and that creates vulnerabilities that are specific to a particular thing. But there's the other side of crypto, which is it becomes vulnerable just because the bad guys get compute power.
Right.
It isn't that the algorithm is broken or the implementation is broken. It's just that the bad guys got better stuff.
Well,
is it just solely compute power, not having to do with any kind of logic or intelligence? It's really compute power, or multiple factors.
It is in most cases. I mean, predictions about the arrival of quantum computing.
Yeah.
Goes a little bit beyond compute power. That starts to get into the ability to conduct particular algorithms and particular searches that you can't do on existing classical computers.
So it's interesting.
So that's a little bit different.
Quantum computing is not just about power, but using that power in a different, more intelligent way to break algorithms?
In this case, it's really not about power at all. That's what's unique about what's called the quantum threat. Is there's this algorithm called Shor's algorithm, which allows you to calculate a private key from a public key, right? So you just go get a certificate from Amazon.com, whatever you like, and you just calculate the private key. So that's a very bad thing. So the good news is you can't run Shor's algorithm on a classical computer. Simple as that. Can't do it. Just can't do it. So the quantum computer can run Shor's algorithm. So this has been known for 20 years. Right? This is so the algorithm is a theoretical algorithm right now. If a quantum computer can run it, then that's like a night and day issue.
If I may, to try to answer Paul's question, the idea of cryptography, and this goes back even to World War II and breaking the Enigma machine. They were breaking Enigma messages, but it took them too long to break the messages because they were brute forcing them.
Right.
Longer than the usefulness of the information that they were deriving in most cases. So they came up with a cryptographic attack where they could predict some of the keys based on all the messages starting with Heil Hitler.
Right.
And the computing power gave them the ability to speed up the process. When I struggled with this when I was at NSA, because there was one time when I was in a crypto shop and somebody came up with a cryptographic attack, and it was actually against one of our systems. And the cryptographic attack by definition reduces the work factor to solve the crypto problem by 10%. That's the definition, at least it was at the time, of a cryptographic attack. And this person had come up with an attack that had reduced the work factor by 25%. Astronomical in terms of the mathematical exponential savings in terms of the work factor. Still not solvable in the near future because they didn't have the computing power to take it the rest of the way. But my point being is cryptographic attack is actually pretty rare historically. It's usually the implement errors or just frankly stealing the key. Getting copies of the key, or relying on or taking advantage of the fact that people are misuse or don't follow the directions, like in this instance with Duck, using a hardwired key and using a constant. Easily solved if they stop doing those two things.
That's
but not as easy to do because it's probably hard-coded and how many implementations and how long will it take to update.
Suffice to say, I'm not directly breaking the key, but I'm coming up with other attacks against the crypto that reduce the amount of compute power it takes to break the key.
Right. I mean, the cryptography is based on the philosophy that no amount, if you had infinite amount of computers, it's still barely worth your while trying to break this stuff.
Right.
So anything that dramatically changes the amount of work that you have to apply to break this key is interesting, because that's starting to chip away at the sort of the tenet of cryptography, which is it ain't worth your effort.
Right.
As soon as it becomes worth your effort, that's a problem, and that's
reducing the effort could
it's like Jeff said. Yes, there were wrinkles in the way that the Germans coded messages, but the issue is, Turing built a machine to actually go and massively accelerate the number of key combinations that they could test in a day, to the point where they could find a key before the end of the day and the key got changed. So the reason why NIST say this algorithm at this particular implementation standard is good for 35 years is because they're making some presumptions about how computers will evolve during those 34 years.
Yeah.
At any time, somebody might come up with some genius way to radically shortcut the amount of the algorithmic approach to brute forcing these keys, in which case everything shrinks down quick. Trouble is, it takes us 10 years to approve a new algorithm, so that's the problem. So we have to take a long-term predictive approach to this.
I just want to say, too, I love that they made that movie The Imitation Game, because it meant that people that aren't in our field, that aren't even like in technology fields at all, would come up to me, like my in-laws, and they would say, they came to me, and it was like one of my like awesome moments, right? Where they're like, yeah, we watched this movie, and this guy made this computer, and it did like, I'm like, Alan Turing, and they're like, yeah, how did you know? I'm like, well, he's very famous in our field, like for a lot of reasons.
That's right.
Of all the accomplishments.
We have a conference room named after him.
Yeah, right. And they were like, they were stunned that like they gave me basically a sentence. So like we watched this movie, and it was basically a sentence, and I'm like, yeah, Alan Turing, The Imitation Game. And they're like, how did you know that? I'm like, because people are in technology, and especially pay attention to security or especially cryptography, are like, well, yeah, we know the whole story for so many reasons. And I think it's great that made it into kind of mainstream culture and gave us an opportunity to tell people about his accomplishments and cryptography in general, right? Like that was a huge, as Jeff points out, like it's a huge, not just turning point in the war, but there's so many talking points to that, which is cool.
It's along those lines. I don't know if you had seen this, Richard, but it's appropriate to bring it up. The last surviving radio intercept officer from Bletchley Park in World War II passed away recently. She was 97 years old. Her name was Allison Robbins. If we do show notes, I can post a link to an article about her.
Sure.
I actually went to Bletchley Park a month or so ago. I just happened to go there for a conference, and it was really cool.
That must have been really cool.
And it's like a time capsule. I mean, it's
really?
just
they've kept it
absolutely as it was. Amazing.
That's pretty awesome.
What they don't have is an original Colossus machine, unfortunately, but they have a supposedly perfect replica of it, which is it works. And it runs. The dials go around, and
no way.
They do a demo of a key crack.
They replicated the machine.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's great.
That's awesome.
It's very cool.
You also want to talk about some new NIST standard. There was a new NIST standard. So I like that we established NIST as the authority on many levels.
Yeah.
And there's a new NIST standard you wanted to talk about.
It's not it's a draft standard, so I think it's soon to be out. I mean, one never knows with the government, of course, how quickly anything happens. I guess it's like tax plans. Topical, come on, it's topical.
That
too. But I think it actually ties to this, what we're just talking about, this duck attack, right? This whole idea that you could use a fixed seed and some algorithm that then takes that fixed number and generates a bunch of pseudo-random numbers. So there's been an algorithm, well, there are a variety of algorithms for generating pseudo-random numbers from seeds. Most famously, of course, one of those was deprecated 3 years ago when it was claimed that there was a backdoor built into it. Edward Snowden told us this in one of his disclosures, that, hey, there's a weak random number generator out there, and it's part of the NIST suite, which has now been taken out as well. So that's another example of deprecation. But there's never been a standard for how...
Did they take it out based on Edward Snowden's?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess that's another reason when stuff gets deprecated. A, somebody finds a vulnerability. B, because we think computers are going to get fast enough to break it. And C, because we're told there's a backdoor in it. Right? So they're all good reasons to deprecate, all good reasons to listen to NIST. Anyway, so we have these algorithms, there's 4 or 5, for generating random numbers from seeds, but there's no standard right now for defining what the hell that seed should be, how random it should be, how you could test its quality, and how you should connect it to this pseudo-random number generator algorithm. And it's like there's an algorithm for dealing cards, but there's no standard for shuffling cards, and there's no standard for how you shuffle a particular deck of cards.
I like that analogy. That's the first time you used this analogy on the show. I like it.
But
it helps a lot.
Because defining randomness is really hard. Okay, so if you're going to seed these PRNGs, these pseudo-random number generator algorithms, how do you know this seed's random? And not just hard-coded into the source.
Right.
So how do you measure its randomness? How do you go validate where these seeds come from? None of that's standardized today. So even in sort of universal crypto certification schemes like FIPS 140, there's no standard for measuring the randomness of these seeds, or defining where they come from, or defining how you actually get to use them to reshuffle this whole process. So that's an area that NIST have been working on for 5 years, because this is a tough problem. Proving randomness and measuring randomness is really hard, because you're trying to prove the absence of anything. And trying to prove the absence of anything is hard. It's like, how long do you look? Right. If you told me there's no mouse in this room, like, how long would I bother looking around this room to prove there's no mouse in the room?
Our operations manager, Sam, I think deals with this problem at a certain level, in that we have banner advertisements on our website, and it's supposed to rotate randomly. And there's an algorithm for our main website and an algorithm for a wiki archive site, and they're two different pieces of code. And she really struggles to say, is it really showing it at the same time? She'll come to me like, I refreshed the page so many times and I only saw it this many times. But I think that's the same problem you're talking about. Like, how do you know how random something is? It's a hard thing to measure.
It's like on your iPod. You think, how come I'm getting so many of these songs from this same album? That doesn't seem very random, right? I mean, how many
Apple had problems with that over the years, right?
Plenty of people saying, hang on, this doesn't seem very random to me. Are they pushing an album or pushing a particular artist?
But wasn't the story like it really was truly random, but the way you listen to it, it didn't quite make sense, so they had to make it like almost less random to make it make sense to people, right?
That's right.
So I remember hearing on that.
That's right, because say you did Powerball, right, and the balls came out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That wouldn't be very convincing as a draw, would it?
Randomly coming. It's not going to come out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 again, right? Because it's random.
One would hope.
One would hope.
But even if it came out,
it could. No, you're right.
But even if it came out once, it wouldn't be very convincing. On the news show the next morning, we're like, okay, that sounds like something went wrong, something broke, right? So anyway, proving randomness is like, gee, how long do you bother looking? How much data? If I said to you, is the number 22 random? How would you know?
How do you put that in context?
Where would you start?
Where do you draw the lines to how you put that in context?
But if I gave you 1 billion numbers and I say, okay, scrutinize all of that stuff and see if you can find any patterns. Gee, they're all even, or they're all odd, or there's all manner. You could, infinite number of patterns that could live in that stuff. How long would you look at that block of data and say, okay, I'll give up? It seems to be random. So proving randomness, and even worse, still measuring randomness and putting a score on it, and saying, right, this is 10 out of 10 random, but this is only 5 out of 10 random, or 3 out of 10 random. How'd you do that?
There's so many factors involved in that.
Well. So NIST are trying to strike that balance. On the one hand, you want it to be a reliable tool, but at the same time, it can't take 10 years to go measure randomness for a chunk of data, because this is operational stuff, and lots happen. We've got a lot of web connections. They all need random numbers. They all need nonces. So they've tried to strike a balance between a test suite that you can literally run almost in real time to come up with a measure for randomness, to say this seeding algorithm, this seeding process to shuffle these pseudo random number generators appears to be legitimately random. Because if you can have an algorithmic pseudo random number generator, and you can seed it with true randomness, then you can claim the output is truly random.
Right.
And that's great, as long as the input is truly random. The analogy, if you like analogies, right?
I do.
The other one,
especially when we're talking about crypto and
well, you have to, right? Because otherwise it gets mind bending. So think of a pseudo random number generator. It's like an audio amplifier. all right?
Yeah, now you're talking my language. Yep.
Right, the audio guy. You can put a weak signal in, and you get a big, strong signal out, and you can drive your PA or whatever it is, your super mega blaster
I totally get that.
in your car and all that stuff.
Yep.
So it makes it louder, just like a PRNG makes more bits. But a PRNG doesn't add any randomness, right? The seed is what contains the randomness. The shuffle is what contains the randomness.
It doesn't change my audio. It just makes it louder.
So it doesn't make the song any better.
No.
Right? It makes the song louder. But if it's a Taylor Swift song, it's always a Taylor Swift song.
Oh God!
I mean,
yes.
If
it's a,
I'm a Radiohead guy, so I'm.
If it's a 56 kbps MP3, it's going to sound more crappy.
No, I'm not talking about the quality of the coding. I'm talking about the music.
Oh,
is it a good song?
Right.
So an amplifier never makes a song a better song.
Correct.
It just makes it louder. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same with the PRNG. It generates more bits, but it doesn't make them any more random. If the thing going in, the seed, which may only be a few hundred bits, if that's not random, then the output's not random. And that's what was exploited in this duck attack. So it focuses people's minds on, where are these seeds, where they come from, how good are they, how can I test them, who's making them, what's the philosophy behind this randomness, And that's the thing there's never been a standard for. And that's the standard that NIST are going to come out with. So this will become part of mainstream crypto certification schemes, like your phone and your laptop and these, the chips that we talked about in the Rocker attack. All this stuff's FIPS 140 certified. So these entropy tests, these randomness tests, will become part of that suite. So it'll become a big deal and will trigger a lot of upgrades down the line, I think, because.
So when we talk about hardware crypto devices, that's still separate from your Whitewood solution and other solutions that generate randomness, right? I mean, those are really two different things, right? Because in order to have crypto, you need to have randomness to, like you're saying, to see that crypto.
So most hardware devices aren't really about randomness. They're really about physically protecting the keys, tamper resistance. Right?
Okay.
So they're really trying to protect from insider attacks. Like a hardware security module, you spend your 20 grand and you buy the box, and it's got keys and locks on the front, and it's got these things are literally full of epoxy resin, so you can't even probe around on the board. Like a smart card, the chip inside the smart card is physically protected. You can't start drilling into the thing to find the keys and pull the keys out of memory. So these are really anti-tamper devices, which is fundamentally guarding against insider attacks. Someone that has physical access,
of attacks, right?
Yeah, somebody that can actually probe around, wave an aerial around a data center, and try and pick up radiated noise to try and see what's going on inside the circuitry. So most hardware crypto is about physically protecting keys from theft. Because they've got hardware, they can use circuitry to generate decent random numbers as well. But they don't fundamentally exist to generate good randomness. They exist to physically protect keys.
Yeah.
And
the problem they're solving is different.
Right, and this was the grand irony of Rocker, is that the vulnerability and the implementation error was in TPM chips, which live on the motherboard, right, to physically store keys, HSMs, and smart cards. So the people that were affected by Rocker most were the people that actually tried to do the right thing. The people that are actually trying to put their keys in hardware and physically protect it and lock it down. Unfortunately, they're the ones that get burnt. And the guys that are just doing it in software, they're okay.
Right.
Which is sort of the grand irony.
Ironic,
the grand irony of Rocker, is the people that try to do it get burnt.
Right.
But there you go.
So I just had a realization as you guys were talking about that, and I want you all to shoot holes in this possibly, but it strikes me that that we've got a fundamental shift going on in the world of web applications, which Paul and I were talking about a lot today. And part of that shift is moving away from HTTP 1.1 to HTTP 2. And one of the things that is occurring there is we're moving away from lots and lots of small, very short-lived TCP sessions to multiplexing lots of data across one potential TCP session. And if TLS is involved there, my hypothesis is this potentially gives the attackers more surface area to capture more keying material over time, maybe even raising the chance of compromise of cryptographic protocols as they transit HTTP2.
So I think this is directly what we were talking about relative to the Enigma machine, right?
Yep.
The Germans figured this out. They changed the keys every day. So if you couldn't crack the key in the day, you were already out. Right. You're 2 steps behind. So, the philosophy with SSL TLS to date has been these data encryption keys, which are symmetric AES keys, are ephemeral. They're only there for relatively long, short-lived sessions. Mm-hmm. Your shopping experience, and this was always one of the concerns when people.
My shopping experience probably is pretty long, but anyway.
Relatively. Okay. But when people started using SSL for VPNs, so you've now got month-long, year-long nailed-up sessions. So you've now got an enormous amount of data encrypted by a single long-lived key. And the more data that a key encrypts, ultimately the more vulnerable that key becomes, because the more ciphertext it's generated. So the more, the more surface area.
Even the more ciphertext that you have, it can lead to attacks. Not just having plain text and ciphertext.
Right, it gives you more to analyze.
Right, but it gives you more ciphertext to analyze.
That's right.
That's interesting.
That's right.
In other words, Richard's telling me I'm right.
Yeah, we're telling
your theory
you're right,
Geoff. Yeah.
But it's no different than changing your passwords every week. It's the same deal, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Jeff?
Paul, if you think back to the talk you're saying that you like that I gave, it's the idea of depth. If you have more stuff that's encrypted by the same key, you have more attempts at trial and error. Try it here,
I gotcha.
Extend it or repeat it. Hey, that looks good, or it doesn't look good. And the more you can kind of line up and try at the same time, it speeds up the process.
So it's back to shortcuts, just like Rocker. I mean, the reason why the Rocker vulnerability exists, the Rocker allows you to calculate private keys from a public key, is because, in this case, Infineon took a shortcut. The most burdensome task in generating keys, asymmetric keys, is proving a number is a prime number. You can only make keys out of prime numbers. So proving a number is a prime number is actually really hard to do. Because you have to try, you have to go back and try all the factors that could have realized that number. If you can't find any factors, it's a prime number. So
which is harder, proving random or proving prime?
Oh, proving random. Because proving,
great question.
Because proving prime is definitive. Because there are only so many factors you can try, and if you run out, if you don't find any, then it is a prime number definitively. So we know, we know that 3 is a prime number, whereas you could never prove 3 is a random number. So primality is definitive. But the trouble is, if you've generated a key pair, it's an indeterminate period of time that it's going to take you to prove that it's a prime number, which means the key generation process becomes indeterminate, which means your ability to connect this web connection becomes indeterminate. So that's a problem if you're running a data
performance-wise. That's
so primality checking is the bottleneck in generating asymmetric keys.
So they took a shortcut to make it faster.
Exactly. So there are primality checking accelerator algorithms that you can use, and that's one of the things they used.
Wow, can you say that again? What was that?
Primality.
Now you can't say
not after a gin and tonic, no. Primality checking acceleration algorithms.
What was that first word?
Primality.
Primality acceleration algorithms. Oh, I love it. That's awesome.
It's called fast prime for short, but anyway,
I like fast prime,
which is
fast prime,
which I think conveys the point.
Yes,
but this
some might call it Optimus Prime.
Nice one, Jeff.
Or fast, slightly prime. So this is a library that they built into these crypto chips, which ended up in smart cards, and of course, it turns out that's a shortcut that isn't very helpful because it means the keys you end up generating can be factorized, even though they might be prime.
But it goes back to what you were saying about crypto. It worked for a while until somebody figured out it was bad. But until somebody figured out it was bad, it was kind of okay.
It's the same old deal. It's a secure protocol. It's down to implementation. It's when you the longer you get away from the day that the protocol was invented, and developers start to say, well, gee, can we just do this, and can we just do this, and can we just do it this way? You end up with something that is in spirit still secure, but is in practice no longer secure. Because
I think. Also, and correct me if I'm wrong, Richard, but the elliptical curve cryptography tries to address this exponentiation issue, also to make the high degree of efficiency in terms of key generation. Is that correct?
And not just key generation, but actually the algorithms themselves, the signing algorithms. So yeah, ECC was invented for mobile phones.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you can run.
Yeah, because there was a significant. Yeah, otherwise you're going to eat your battery. Basically, there's a significant.
Right, that's right. If you're doing, I mean, RSA is the the granddaddy of asymmetric crypto, which is fine on your laptop or on a server, but on a phone it's going to kill it. So yeah, so ECC was invented for low power devices. So ECC became the enabler of the IoT, if you like, and it became the enabler of mobile apps and mobile computing and mobile payments and all that good stuff. But it still suffers the same problem. You still got to find prime numbers to be keys.
Yeah.
In this case, the Infineon issue was only RSA, so ECC wasn't affected. It was just the RSA algorithm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Awesome. I learned so much in this segment. That was so awesome. And, any other closing thoughts, questions, comments?
Only that everybody should keep in mind that AES was approved in 2001. Okay, we're 16 years in, and I think the new algorithm competition is ongoing right now for a replacement. I wonder if Richard has a comment on that one as well.
Well, the competition is on. I mean, NIST hate calling it a competition. So I never call it a competition.
Sorry.
I mean, it is a competition.
It's a race, not so much a competition.
Is there a difference?
Or is race just
a subset of competitions?
Yeah, it's true.
It's
one form. It's a form of a competition, I guess. Yeah.
Whoever designs the winning algorithm is sure as hell going to think of themselves as a winner.
As a winner,
so
right.
Therefore, it's a competition.
Yeah.
Right? No, I mean, in fact, this month the NIST competition, or the entrance for the competition closed. So this is to find a quantum safe algorithm, something that is safe against the Shor's algorithm, right? So when quantum computers show up, do the Shor's algorithm. So all asymmetric crypto falls foul of Shor's algorithm, not symmetric. So the competition that's ahead right now is not to find a replacement for AES, but it's to find a replacement for asymmetric crypto. It's to find a quantum safe algorithm. Now, normally it takes us 10, like you said, it took us 10 years to prove AES was secure. This one might take a bit longer because A, you're trying to solve a harder problem because you're trying to defend against a quantum computer, not a regular computer. B, we haven't got any quantum computers, so we can't actually test it.
We can't actually see if, right.
And C, not only is this new algorithm got to be quantum safe, it's got to be classically safe as well. So 3 reasons why I think finding a quantum safe algorithm might take longer than it took us to find AES, and that took a long time. So the doors is closing to nominate your candidate. So if you have some brilliant suggestion for a quantum safe algorithm, you better get that letter sent off.
My spare time I've been.
There's already.
I think that.
Go on. There's already 5 or 6 candidates, but probably even more by now.
Well, I think it's important to solve the asymmetric problem first, though. That's appropriate, right? But
yeah. I mean, because the problem with quantum computing, if we wait until we know we have a quantum problem, then it's too late to fix it, because it's going to take us 10, 15 years to invent the algorithm. Then it's going to take vendors 5 years to build the products, and then it's going to take enterprise, as Duck has shown us, for 5 or 10 years to update their boxes.
Right.
So if we think the quantum computer is going to show up in 25 years, we better start now. Right.
Yeah.
So IBM have already got quantum computers online you can go play with. So this is.
Wait, I thought you said a quantum computer didn't exist.
No, they exist, but not big enough to crack keys.
Okay.
But they exist to play with.
Interesting.
So this is, one of the arguments that's put up is the first people that are going to get a quantum computer, or the first people that get supercomputers, historically is governments, right? So it's the Chinese and it's the NSA and all the rest of it. So it's not therefore really a sort of a mass hacking problem because regular hackers don't get access to quantum computers because they don't have $1 billion to go and buy one. But we live in the cloud era right now. So it's as likely that a Google or an IBM or an Amazon is going to have a quantum computer probably as it is the NSA might get one or the Chinese might get one.
So they can rent time on it, much like we did in the early days of computing. I love how everything comes back.
So I think but everything comes full circle.
If I was a big cloud provider and I thought I could develop a quantum computer and I could rent it out as part of my IaaS infrastructure, that'd be a pretty differentiating feature, wouldn't it? Don't you think? So it's not necessarily true, I think, to think that the only people that get quantum computers is the NSA. I think it's entirely possible that you'll be able to rent, you'll rent your slice of a quantum computer from AWS maybe before most national governments get one. So
to crack a key, it's not $1 billion; it's $500 million.
Maybe it's just 100 hours on an AWS quantum instance,
right? Exactly.
As opposed to $10 billion to build your own quantum computer.
Is more achievable earlier on than it is to acquire the computer. Yeah,
right.
No, I totally get it.
Right,
yeah.
And this was shown with the Rocker attack. They were saying you could break 1024-bit keys in 5 minutes using I think 100 instances in AWS.
Right.
So cloud computing is great, but it also gives the attackers access to huge compute resource for virtually no money. And I think that changes the dynamics in terms of when and how regular folk and regular hackers, I mean, talking about malicious hackers, not you guys, obviously.
Of course.
You're nice hackers.
We're good hackers.
But the bad hackers.
We're white hat hackers.
They get access to quantum computers potentially quite easy because they become part of public cloud services. And I think there'll be a race to rent out quantum computers. Right, this is not just stuff that exists, for me.
And when do you think that's a reality, Richard?
Yeah, well, I think that gets back to the NIST conversation. I think NIST are in a good place to recommend that stuff. I mean, NSA put out.
Is it in our lifetimes that we'll see that? You think?
So, some of the universities, like University of Waterloo up in Canada, have sort of global authorities on this stuff, and they say. It's like a 1 in 7 chance of a quantum computer that can break a key. Not just any quantum computer, but one that's big enough to break a decent-sized key in 5 or 6 years, and a 50-50 chance in 12 years. So
definitely in our lifetime.
So that's near enough to be scary, because it's going to take us 12 years to define an algorithm.
Right.
And if that's a 50-50 chance, that seems like a pretty tough bet to me.
I see.
So that's the reason why NIST have accelerated the competition, and that's the reason why the doors are shutting right now on candidates. And then basically it's up to the community to go test this stuff and prove which claims of security are actually viable. There's 3 or 4 technologies for quantum safe algorithms, and there's at least 5 or 6 candidates for each type of technology. And we'll see.
That's awesome.
Go at it.
Awesome. I love this embodied the spirit of Paul Security Weekly this week. This is great. Both practice and theory in the whole conversation, which is awesome.
That's why I think these 3 vulnerabilities sort of span that mix. Some of them
and I like that it kind of we talked about the 3 vulnerabilities, but then talked about the future and stuff. And Jeff and Joff, certainly, thank you very much for your contributions. We're all going to be here. We're going to come back and talk about breaking Kerberos, actually, which is not so much a crypto problem, but is similar in that respect, where we think something is very sound. In terms of authentication, and crypto involved as well, with Tim Medine. And attacking Active Directory has certainly been a theme this year, which I think is going to continue certainly into next year. And I'm very excited to have our next guest on the show. Richard, thank you very much. And you're going to stick around for the next segment, so be able to query and quiz Tim Medine coming up next. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.